Evening. My part of the presentation is nothing like what you just spent an hour and a half learning about, so I hope you don't mind. It's much more about GASP's work locally. Um, this is, I needed a title, I had no idea what to do. Something that Aaron touched on is really weird, I'm not going to lie. This is so much bigger than my laptop screen. I had no idea this old man's face would appear that large before you. Arguably father of toxicology, Perseus, um, Paracelsus, sorry. Um, Dose makes the poison. It's something Aaron touched on. So it's all about some exposures, fine, excessive exposures, neurotoxic. How do you, well, the issue is that middle that Aaron talked about. So where is it coming from? Where are we looking at? Well, there's several sources of manganese that you may find in the environment outside of it occurring naturally. So I actually practiced pronouncing those things earlier. I'm not going to bother. I don't know how much MMT gasoline is used. I looked for statistics. I couldn't find it. I don't know sales figures on Maneb or some of the other fungicides. Primarily around Pittsburgh, we have steel. That's where manganese, at least that's airborne and monitored, is coming from. We have old, I'm not sure if you can see this, this is manganese storehouse at the Carnegie Steel Company circa 1906. It's been here and used here for time out of mind. We have new sources. According to PADEP, these are the 14 sources that contributed reported airborne manganese in 2016, the year for the most recent data. Universal Stainless is out of business, and so is Shenango. But note, Edgar Thompson is actually listed twice. One is for the full data. One is a process release. One is a they're burning something. I forget, combustion release. So that's why they're up there twice. But the combined, clearly they're from just raw tonnage air emissions. I think I have a slide later. It's 100 times. I mean, it's a massive amount more than any of the other. I think more than the rest combined. But as we sort of learned earlier, we get an idea of what, at least from the stationary emission sources, something to mention. Some of those other sources of manganese, past history, from pesticides, from gas usage, we can't know that exactly. But we know how much is, as Aaron pointed out, acutely toxic. We know how much is necessary. We know how much is being emitted. But we still have these questions. And so what we're aiming for, what GASP has been advocating for, is more research. So these are melt logs. One melt log from Conway and Torley facility I've looked at a lot. Every time they melt steel to make their parts, they have probably the spectroscopy tests for manganese. They also add silica manganese. It's in pounds. Usually, I think it's a 20-ton melt, so not much overall, but they're adding silica manganese to it to add manganese into the final mix, lab final percentage, but also to end up in slag products, which will be important later. Manganese pulls sulfur and oxygen out of steel, which steel makers, I think, appreciate, although I'm not a metallurgist and would never be able to represent exactly how or why those things matter. So 3 top facilities, Conway and Torley. So I'm going to ignore Cheswick for now. I'm going to ignore Cheswick for we had some information on it, but it was for time and for other purposes, just focusing on our efforts around steel facilities. So ATI, U.S. Steel, Edgar Thompson, and McConway are the 3 largest local sources. McConway in Lawrenceville, I don't know if anyone, Dave was here, I'm not sure. Hi, Dave. there's Lawrenceville United. So they use EAF arc furnaces, melt scrap steel. They don't have an operating permit ever. It's a long story, but just this is how they operate. They take scrap steel. They literally, you ever see spark between two pieces of metal? Yeah, they do it at thousands of volts. That's literally they electrocute steel, melt it, pour rail coupling castings. But in 2011, there were concerns that some modeling information about their manganese releases, part of their installation permit, they were required to do fence line monitoring. So that's a term in an installation permit, sort of important. You can see that's the last year, and although I don't know if Aaron's numbers are, what, 50 was EPA's number, 300 is ATSDR's. So it's, depending on who you're asking, that's a rolling average creeping up back toward 50, but still seeing spikes. The full data set, that's the whole study. So, well done, McConway, better, but also not plotted against production. So again, we don't know if these numbers are coming down because of their raw tonnage. No, they did install new bag houses toward the very end, so you can see that probably has helped. But the 1 year running average, I think, I don't have it, it's pretty flat. It's come down, but it's somewhere in the upper mid-40s, I believe. So that's a facility that, through advocacy, through working with ACHD, we're able to get fence line monitoring over concern, and they've continued the study. Now, Edgar Thompson is a little different from processing. They do turn rocks into steel, which I have to say is fascinating to me. They have at least one blast furnace, ore, coke, coal. They light it on fire until you get pig iron. They process it differently, end up with slabs. I guess I can be off camera. EAF, they start with steel. They skip the whole front end. Just again, some background as to what's happening inside. They don't really give tours too frequently. It's a bit dangerous. So per tonnage, they had 76 times higher than M&T's. Now it's a much bigger facility. They do much bigger tonnage of steel. But again, it's not one for one. So you can't just say, oh, it must be 76 times that. But there's a lot more manganese coming out of that facility. EPA and ACHD are working on violations as we speak, something we want you to be aware of, because we don't know when it's going to be finalized. And Rachel has not gotten great news as far as it being soon. But again, something we're working on. Again, monitoring. It's about gathering data. It's about trying to understand or making sure the agencies and the industries are letting us know what's coming out. Aaron's pointed out there's a lot of work left to be done as to pinning down that point that becomes, a critical health issue. You're not seeing manganism, you're not seeing people fall over, but it's clearly elevated above at least EPA numbers. This is something we're working on. Stay tuned. Last facility, so didn't change this slide. Okay, I don't know if this is accurate, so strike that. I can't at this point. There was ATIs similar to M&T. They use arc furnaces. They melt steel. You roll products instead of slabs, and they don't do mold. But much bigger facility by tonnage, and they also don't have a permit. They have installation permits. There have been some community complaints with dust being the big issue with how manganese is likely traveling off-site. But Harsco, I mentioned slag earlier, so the process is they add manganese both for the steel final product, but also to help pull sulfur and oxygen out of the steel. So slag can have higher manganese content than the steel itself. Harsco is their slag processor. It's not on site, but it's down the road a little ways. It's not they didn't know, if there were just some concerns over how much they were actually emitting, whether they needed to be permitted, how much. But it's a facility ACHD is now aware of. There's a permit application pending. But again, something we've been active with. And these, again, there's a monitoring program. We're pushing for them to do some metals analysis. As of right now, it's just PM, not looking at this. But again, it's gathering the data that we have these 3 sources. We know what happens there. We know what they're emitting. And it's just that groups like GASP, other community organizations, have a chance to speak to the local health agencies, environmental agencies, and say, you know, we need the information, we need more data. I have no results to report to you at the moment. Unlike esteemed colleagues earlier, I was put this together simply as an update so you understood that how their research, how it applies to GASP, because we don't get NIH grants to conduct research. But that's all I have, and that's about right? Good, okay. Thank you very much.